Hello you all guys, I hope you're all good, all safe, and I'm here today to introduce you to Lilith. The long story behind this guitar I was helped building by the master luthier Philippe Dubreuille. It's a project I've been thinking and then working on for years. And now I'm gonna tell you the whole story. Philippe Dubreuille is a master luthier that worked with many famous artists like Aerosmith, ZZ Top, down to Jennifer Baden and Vernon Reid. Philippe and I met at the Rock and Roll Rescue charity shop in London. The Rock and Roll Rescue is a shop in Camden held by punk rockers who try to help the poor and the weak by selling back donations they get from other rockers. You can find guitars, t-shirts, any kind of rock and roll items, always at very honest prices. And on top of it, you're gonna help the homeless by that, so don't miss the Rock and Roll Rescue charity shop in the Camden Street of Parkway. I often perform in Camden where the shop is, and I can say that's one of the few true rock and roll shops left in the area. So I and this shop always supported each other very much. If I was having trouble with my gear, my guitar, my amp while performing on the street, I went straight to the shop. Philippe Dubreuille was there himself to help with repairs, and he ran a little guitar laboratory in the back of the shop. He used to fix my malfunctioning gear for those few coppers I could have made on that day. By and by, Philippe and I became a little bit friends, and while discussing about guitars, he found out I was looking for a guitar that I needed for the development of my style. But actually that guitar wasn't available on the market. The guitar I had in mind was something never done before, so quite challenging as a project. But I already owned some components. I had bought them before the pandemic started, but I never found a real way to use them. When Philippe Dubreuille heard that I had those components already, he probably thought that the project was challenging. Maybe he liked me and my playing style. Anyway, that man is such a great man that he told me, "John, let's make it. You have the components, you paid for them already, just pay for the raw wood and I'll keep you working here on that and together we can make it." This was something I couldn't have considered in a normal period because I'm usually performing a lot and shooting videos for Patreon in my day offs. But during the spring 2020 lockdown, this sounded like the best thing to do. So what I'm about to tell you is how, with the help of Philippe Dubreuille and several other friends, we made the long way from this to this. In fact, this was a team job, and the full list of the people that really helped out through the process is: I thank Filippo Bertani from Italy, Mr. Moriarty Von Desnaux from London, Fab Pub Laser Cut with his headmaster Giovanni, Mr. Alfredo from Tacco Matto, Corso Vercelli, Torino, and last but not least, Ruben of Necromansy, the cool metal band in Italy. All these people did their bit along with master luthier Philippe Dubreuille, so this is actually a 7-people job. What I needed was a V-shaped 8-string guitar featuring Floyd Rose tremolo, fitted with my usual Puff pickups, microphone and electronics. And I would have strongly preferred that built with the neck-through body formula and featuring a scalloped fingerboard from the 15th fret up. Since I moved to London some years ago, I switched to 7-string guitars because I felt that my move had the meaning of an expanding horizon. So widening my octaves, my musical extension, was quite a natural consequence. Moving from 6 strings guitar to 7 was easier than I thought. So to move further on to the 8-string became part of my natural development and extension growth last year. So to have the lowest bass ever. For those who don't know, the standard 6 strings guitar ends up here. These are the standard 6 strings. If you add the 7th string, you will have a low B. And if you add an 8th string, then you go down to F sharp. If you use a standard tuning, which I do. The 8th string tuned in F sharp makes of this bit of the guitar an actual 4-string bass, where just 2 lower steps to the low E are missing. Quite a few 8 strings guitar are available on the market, but I need my guitar V-shaped because of my specific approach to playing. Performing for me is not just playing in the sense of producing sounds. When I perform, I can never stand still because that's something physical. It gets all my body involved, so the way the guitar hooks to my pelvis as an actual extension of my body is really important for me. As you probably noticed, and the classic round-shaped guitar won't work that way. Just after deep searches, I had to accept there were no V-shaped 8-strings guitar being manufactured anywhere, as well as no 8-strings guitar are being manufactured that feature a Floyd Rose tremolo, regardless their shape. The Floyd Rose tremolo is a mechanism that was invented by Mr. Floyd Rose during the 70s, and it's a tremolo system that's quite more expressive and usable than the traditional Fender style ones. The typical way to explain it is to show you how deep low it can go and how high it can stretch. And it stays in tune. So these are the reasons why Mr. Eddie Van Halen used to say, I wouldn't go anywhere without Floyd. And dudes like Joe Satriani and Steve Vai made of it a specific element of their own style. 2 years ago, before the COVID put all of us, but especially artists, in this big trouble, I discovered that Floyd Rose was manufacturing an 8-string model of their tremolo system. And I purchased one straight from the US factory. That was quite expensive, but anyway less than a guitar, because I bought just the tremolo part and the lockings. My plan was to find a guitar to set this tremolo on by customizing it. So after a while I found second-hand my 8-strings Dean ML8, which I renamed Molly. All my guitars have a girly name. That's a black 8-strings guitar that I'm using actually as a street performer. You might have noticed it in some of my latest videos and photos. It appeared to me at first that I had to set that guitar up with my usual pickups. For those who don't know, the pickups are the electric components that make the actual difference between an electric and an acoustic guitar. The actual microphones that deliver the sound out of the output jack of the guitar to the amp. On electric guitar, they're based on a magnetic principle, so they don't catch the sound around the room, but just the vibration of the metal strings. They wouldn't work with nylon or plastic strings, but this solution helps a lot eliminating unwanted feedbacks. Molly had been equipped by her previous owner with the Seymour Duncan Black Winter pickups. These pickups were designed specifically for Scandinavian black metal, so supposed to be particularly edgy with an emphasis on trebles in their sound. On the other hand, my favorite pickups are usually the Puffs, which are the classic model created for Gibson vintage guitars. That works great for blues. They were used by Led Zeppelin, Kiss and all the 70s classic rock artists, and later all the way through the classic metal bands and punks like Sex Pistols and Exploited. In my opinion, they're really alright for modern rock as well. As an example, Joe Satriani uses them. They deliver a more mellow sound anyway, so I see them more as all-rounders. because I don't want to get stuck by an inappropriate sound if at some point I want to go back to play jazz standards. When I had modified the Corina, that was my first 7-string guitar that came to London with me, I installed the Puff pickups for 7 strings. I found them by DiMarzio, that's a company in the US that offers quality, reliable pickups, great customer service, and they can customize the look of the pickups with no extra charge. So I went for the black and white color, the so-called zebra, because black and white are the color of the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, and I've always liked that symbolism. For the same reasons of keeping maximum tone flexibility and not to get stuck with extreme gens, I thought it was good to go for separate tone controls for the 2 pickups. The classic Gibson Les Paul guitar is probably the only guitar that started as a jazz guitar and then ended up in the hands of rockers. Being basically unmodified, that was played by the whole generation of the classic metalheads and punks. I've used the Les Pauls for ages and they sport 2 volumes, 2 tones, so 1 volume and 1 tone for each pickup, and a 3-position switch to select which pickups are being used. This allows maximum versatility because it lets you EQ and mix the 2 pickups separately. On the other hand, anytime you see a guitar that has 2 or 3 pickups but just 1 volume and 1 tone, or eventually just 1 volume, that's a guitar made to get just edgy, heavy distorted sounds and no other options within the clean sounds range. When it came to set 2 separate controls on Corina, who's a flying V anyway, I had to face the fact that there's no space on a V-shaped body for 4 knobs and so 2 separate tone controls. So the custom solution I found was to set up 2 concentric pots who take the space of 1, whether they work independently between each other. So Corina is a 7-string standard guitar built years ago by Epiphone, but the concentric pots and the 2 zebra puff pickups make her unique. My plan was to set the puffs on Molly as well, so I ordered the custom-made 8 strings DiMarzio zebra puffs. My plan was to set them up on Molly as well as the Floyd Rose 8-string tremolo I've already bought. Just found out this wasn't possible because the guitar wasn't physically made to receive it. Molly's wood wouldn't have held the pressure of the 8-string tremolo because her pickup hole was too near to the bridge position. So I had to give up with that, and I was really sad because I couldn't have a Floyd on my guitar, and because I bought a Floyd I couldn't use. I could have changed the pickups, yes I could have. But playing the Black Winters a bit, I started liking them as well. I started feeling that their sound, even though it's edgy, was quite good for garage, stoner rock, even funky rock, and I decided to keep them there. That's the sound you can hear on the My Guitar Is Gonna Kill Your Virus single. And you will agree, it does its job, doesn't sound too harsh. Then Molly is a cool guitar, but she's not a V anyway. She got a 3rd spike that's quite useless in my opinion. Adds weight, obstructs the access to the higher frets, and I would have had that 3rd spike cut off if the operation hadn't been more expensive than the guitar itself. So I love to play the Dean ML8, but it's kind of a compromise for me. Then all the pandemic thing started. So this is how it happened that I had pickups and the tremolo worth hundreds left unused in my drawer. Now let's go a little bit deeper into the project of Lilith, the new guitar I have. The guitar is a neck-through body concept, and that was my specific request. because I believe that any guitar or bass should be just a true body, which means a single piece of wood all the way through the portion of guitar the strings vibrate along with. Many famous guitars have their necks bolt on, which means the neck is held on the body with screws. And the core of the guitar actually consists of two different pieces. I believe that carving the guitar out of a single piece of wood is quite a bit more solid, and more musical too, because it increases the sustain. This means that notes tend to last longer and have richer harmonics if there's a single bit of wood vibrating along them. So Philippe took a slice made of walnut, maple and bubinga woods. And out of this layer that's a single bit all the way through, we engraved the core of the guitar, as you see in picture. That was a tough job for me, but with the time, Philippe's tools and the direction, it finally worked. Next step was to create the V shape, applying wings to it. We made them out of a layer of mahogany, ash and mahogany woods. And by later applying a maple top on the body, the basic structure was made. This process took us a few weeks. The shape was conceived by me and Philippe, and it actually represents the shape of my hairy horns and the color. Then I wanted glow-in-the-dark tomb-like crosses instead of the usual fretboard dots. I have to specify here, I never considered myself worth a custom guitar. But once for playing reasons and with help from some friends, I have the chains to build it. It appears to me quite right to take these unique chains and to make it with a cool and peculiar look as well. So these are Celtic crosses, the ones that you usually find on tombs, and the reverse pentagram marks the 12th fret. The red LEDs I provided were connected by Philippe and I underneath the ebony fingerboard to provide the lights.
D'après ce qu'ont pu établir les gendarmes, aujourd'hui à l'auberge vivent 3 personnes.
The fingerboard is scalloped from the 15th fret up to the highest one. The scalloping makes the smaller frets in this section more handy to play. It's a solution I've noticed the first on the Ibanez Gem guitars, that's Steve Vai's signature. And it is such an obvious solution that I wonder why it's not just applied to any guitar. Lilith has a 25th fret. Usual modern guitars have 24 up to the higher E, but as long as I have one track, Deserted Life, which is in F key, so to have an higher F was cool for me. And this makes of Lilith a guitar whose extension is actually one note more than any other 8-string guitar. Now, fact is that inlay engraving in an ebony fingerboard is a job in itself. Philippe suggested me to look for a laser cut shop and submit to them my digital icons for the inlays symbol to be cut in the ebony by their machines. That's how I met the great Giovanni, headmaster at Fab Pub Laser Cut in London, to cut the ebony and the white transparent plastic bits of which the inlays physically consist. Fab Pub Laser Cut is a young and small London company which I strongly recommend, because they offer very professional services at very affordable prices and an extremely committed but very friendly service. About the job in itself, first of all, creating the original digital source file isn't as immediate as you could think. The engravings have to become smaller and smaller in proportion to the frets. Same thing about the distance between each other, because all of them have to fall exactly in between the 2 frets next to them. If you edit your file with even slightly wrong proportion and then you start the laser cutting machine, you're likely to ruin your fingerboard. So Giovanni and I ran quite a few tests on cheap wood to make sure the proportions of the engraving was really right. Looks like a cool game for some children, right? Then, time for the real cut. Rock and roll! Let's burn down crosses in ebony. What's more black metal than this? We burning pentagrams in wood with lasers. But guess what? You might have heard about ebony being the hardest wood in the world, compared to iron at times. Which is actually the reason why it's so appreciated for musical instruments fingerboard, because it's hardly getting used. Just this becomes a little bit of a downside. If your engraving cut through inlays in it, it came out. The lasers can draw on ebony but can't cut through. The wood burns but doesn't cut. I could just have the white transparent plastic inlays cut at the Fab Pub. Then we used the laser to draw the shapes of the inlays on the fingerboard at proper distance and size. It was my friend Moriarty to manually cut through the ebony. Moriarty Von Desnaux is an all-round guitar and amp repairer and modifier. On his YouTube channel you can find many cool jobs he does, including some more for me. Moriarty followed the guidelines the laser had made to do a hand engraving. He cut holes through the ebony and finally inserted the transparent inlays in it. But here he is!
G'day guys, my name is Moriarty Von Desnaux, and I'm an all-round artist who's worked on many different projects over the years, some of which are guitars, including this wonderful project that I'm very pleased to have worked on. I will tell and show you more in this clip. So, now knowing everything that I needed to get the project started, and also John being a lovely bloke, giving me a bit of extra time because not as fit and healthy as he used to be, a bit of a raspberry, I was ready to go. So as you can see from a little bit earlier in this video, I set out by highlighting everywhere where the people at the laser company had marked into the fretboard, which would make it much easier for me a bit later on when trying to see where to drill my starter holes. This would then lead on to me inserting a fine saw blade, which I had to customize out of another one because unfortunately I didn't have the hindsight to get any fine ones in. So, you know, make do as one can. Once I'd inserted the saw blade, I proceeded to cut out all the centers of the fret markers, so that much later on I could come in with a set of different files and slowly file away in different places and continue a process of back and forth with trying to fit the perspex markers into the fretboard. Once I had gone through this and successfully got the markers all to fit, all nice and smooth, one of the things John did want is to try and fit as much of the wood into some of the smaller spaces in the markers as possible. We agreed that we would go up to the pentagram, and then afterwards he would be fine with just having the glue I use to fill the smaller holes higher up the neck. So, me being me, I wanted to try and get some of the some of the wood from the fretboard into the smaller markers. So one of the things I did during my process of filing was to collect some of the finer dust that had spread everywhere. So when it came to the gluing up, I actually mixed some of the fretboard material into the glue that I mix up. So technically, he actually has the wood filled in the smaller spaces, much higher up the neck. And once everything was glued up, I then went back and tidied up any excess glue off of the board and left it to set overnight. When I came back to it the next day, it was looking gorgeous and ready to be taken back by John to Philippe to add on to this amazing project. And that's my little journey. So once again, thank you, Philippe and John, for involving me with this groovy project, and I hope my work goes to serve you for many decades to come and bringing rock and roll to everyone. So, be excellent, rock on, and back to you, John, and the rest of this cool and groovy story.
Moriarty is cool, isn't it? Thanks, Moriarty. About the fingerboard inlays, there's one last detail that some guitar players could have noticed, and it's interesting to clarify. Look at the position of my inlays, then compare them to those of a standard guitar. They're different, they're wrong here between the 5th and the 7th fret. Standard guitars fingerboards mark the odd frets, so the 3rd, the 5th, the 7th, the 9th, and then the only even one is the 12th, because that's the octave. Then you have the odds again up to the end. Music interval talking, this means the minor 3rd, the so-called perfect 4th, perfect 5th, and diminished the 7th. This last one I kept as well. So instead of markers 5th and 7th, I put just one on the 6th fret, which represents the diminished 5th interval. For those who don't know, European music theory has its own history and started being written when some medieval monks and priests became the first music scientists of our age, and wrote books about how music should have been composed. They named and classified all the intervals and the durations available, but they did this, as they said, for the glory of the god, because music was supposed just to elevate souls during the Mass, and anyone trying to use music just for fun or for eventual lustful or lewdish aims was called a sinner and eventually burned on a stake. So the most perfect intervals, the one that represented God in their opinion, were the unison and the octave. Example of unisons. Octaves. These intervals were supposed to be the perfect ones because they represented the peaceful nature of life in the name of God. After them, the best intervals were the perfect 4th and the perfect 5th, which are the inversion of the other, so they're technically the same interval. Inversion means that by shifting octave of one of the two notes of a 4th, that becomes the 5th, and vice versa. Then, preferred but already dangerously dissonant were 3rds and 6ths. Here we hear the major thirds and sixths. Absolutely forbidden was the diminished fifth, equivalent to the fourth sharp, which was called the Quinta Diaboli, that in Latin means
the devil's fifth.
This interval was also called Diabolus in Musica, so the devil in music, because of its creepy, anxiety-generating sound was considered the expression of the devil himself. Then this interval became the main blue note that characterized the moaning, the tuned sound of the first ever modern devil's music, the blues. White Americans, when hearing the slaves singing and playing like that, they called them savage and out of key. The priests later rushed trying to convert them to Christianism. And now this interval has become a specific of any heavy metal anthem, whether old or new one. Probably most artists use it just because they like the sound. But let me tell you, I actually think that the diminished fifth is the demonstration of the imperfection of God and the perfection of Satan, at least about music matters. In fact, even if the standard fifth is called the perfect fifth, it has to be inverted to generate a perfect fourth, and to reach the upper octave by the overlapping of the two. On the other hand, the Quinta Diaboli is called Tritone as well, because it consists of 3 tones, which means 6 steps. Being the octave 12 steps, the tritone is the only interval that divides it exactly in 2 equal parts. As a consequence, the following creepier and sadder interval available, the minor third, which consists of 3 steps, is its exact half. So by overlapping 2 minor thirds, you have a tritone. And by overlapping 2 tritones, so 4 minor thirds, you have an octave. It's like if you overlap twice the sadness of a minor third, you get the creepy Tritone. And the inversion of a Tritone is Tritone again. It's the inversion of itself, while it's a perfect half of an octave, which is described as octave symmetrizing. And it recreates and regenerates itself over and over the octaves as easy as sin, lust, but also freedom of thought and freedom of speech tend to regenerate naturally amid humans, while perfectly written laws need a constant enforcement to be maintained. All that said, you can understand why this guitar had to carry fretboard icons laid down like that, and why Lilith is the proper she-devil in the occult history. That's the reason why I decided I needed a Lilith logo as well. All my guitars show the Amdusias logo on them, because Amdusias is the demon that watches over music and he's my general. Just here I wanted the name of the guitar, Lilith, in that place, and this became another theme job. Filippo Bertani, with his calligraphy skills, hand-drew the logo and scanned it for me. Then back to Mr. Giovanni at Fab Pub Laser Cut to make it become a laser-compliant file, and finally a stencil to be cut through wood by laser machines. Finally, at the painting stage, Philippe and I used his machine to spray physically the logo on Lilith's body. Also, this beautiful red sunburst color kept the devilish red, but allowed the flamed maple top that's underneath to be seen. Last but not least, its ages I just play wireless, so Philippe and I set up my wireless transmitter built-in. And this is a very clever and smart system, because when it's plugged, But if I take the plug off, that's the wireless sound. I've learned a lot of things through this, because I've never made a guitar myself before, and I wouldn't even have been able to do it myself. But with the help of Master Luthier Philippe Dubreuille, that was possible. And now here Philippe, in his own words.
Rock Camden Town with the Flying V we made for you, Lilith. Okay, then enjoy and do the best you can with it and keep rocking. Allez, ciao mon frère, salut.
Then you could question, what about the leather covering here? Well, this is actually Italian leather. This is something that I make for all my guitars, with the help of my friend shoemaker Alfredo of Tacco Matto in Corso Vercelli, Torino. This Italian shoemaker is my good friend and a very honest man, and he makes all the covers for my guitars for a very sweet price. Because I love to play wearing lots of studs and belts, that is my style, but I mentioned I needed to keep my guitar near as an extension of my body. So to avoid my babies to be scratched, harmed and ruined by my belts, I had leather covers made for the backs, customized by my friend Alfredo. Leather is attached with Velcro, of the kind usually used for guitar pedals. So that's completely removable, keeps the back of the guitar accessible, but protects it when it's being played. So thanks to Alfredo of Tacco Matto and his honesty and friendship, I was helped giving Lilith the final touch. So with this video, I first have to thank all you wonderful patrons that on Patreon helped me stay alive all across the COVID pandemic and lockdown. And your names you'll find listed at the end of the video. Oliver, thank you Oliver, thank you Chris, thank you Ste, thank you Carol, thank you DJD, thank you Sarah, thank you Antonio, thank you Leia, thank you Yvonne, thank you Paul, thank you Franz, thank you Rinaldo, thank you Neo. And you will enjoy this wonderful guitar in my next performances from now on. Then I have to thank Master Luthier Philippe Dubreuille that conceived this baby with me and made it possible. Thanks go to Fab Pub Laser Cut London and their headmaster Giovanni. Thanks to Mr. Moriarty Von Desnaux that cut the E-lace in the fingerboard with his own hands. And last but not least, thanks to Filippo Bertani for this amazing logo. And Alfredo from Tacco Matto in Torino that made the leather cover for the back of Lilith. And Ruben from Necromansy, the metal band, is cutting all my videos. Thank you. Check out Necromansy on Facebook, YouTube, and all social media. Check out Necromancy music. It's worth. So guys, this has been a wonderful thing for me to happen. And I can say, if I had the power of rolling the time back, still I would definitely prefer the pandemic to never happen. Because of all the tragic situation we all found ourselves in. But I also believe that most of us had something good out of the bad at some point. And this is my personal good for that bad. That was also a way for me to use those bits and pieces that I was keeping there since ages ago. And I probably would never have used otherwise. And finally, to realize this dream. Life is all a dream, but sometimes, when you don't even expect that, they become true. So now it's up to me to play this beauty properly, and to play her good enough to deserve it. This is quite a big challenge, but you know that.
I love challenges.
So thank you very much you all for your support, and keep following me, so you will be able to check out my future videos, where I will be playing just her. Bye! Haha!